There's a big name on the trade market, potentially in the NHL. Could Kevin Adams and the Sabres surprise us? A loss in Boston leads to another opportunity to win their first game in now exactly a month. Sabres and Islanders, some interesting lineup stuff, and more. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen's down year. Lot to get to coming up on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
You're Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, and thanks for making this Monday edition of the Locked On Sabres podcast your first listen. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. That does include our YouTube channel, where you can watch the show. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. Start the new year coming up with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Sneaky Joe DiBiase on day 30 of the Sabres losing streak. By the way, I know that the NHL calls it a winless streak. It's an annoyance to me because they don't want you to think an overtime loss is an actual loss. An overtime loss is a type of loss. It literally says loss in it. It's a type of loss. So, for 13 games in a row, the Sabres have gone into a game and they've left that night saying, we lost the hockey game. In my opinion, that means a 13-game losing streak, whatever the NHL tries to tell you their verbiage is. 13-game losing streak. The Sabres lose in Boston on Saturday, and they lost in Toronto on Friday night. I was at the game. They lost in Buffalo on Friday in front of a lot of Leaf fans. Not as many as I might have thought. I thought there was going to be like 90 to 95% Leaf fans, and it felt to me more like 65-35 from where I was sitting. A little tough to gauge, but that's what I would have said for that game. So, a lot to get to on today's show. If you would like to become a part of our Locked On Sabres text club, if you got a rant that you want to throw our way, if you are thinking of one in the middle of the game, or you want some updates on practice or injuries or trade stuff around the league, join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres is the place where you can sign up for all of that. So, Sabres and Islanders, Monday night game, 7:30 puck drop. I'm sure it'll go great, right? They're playing a team that always just locks them down. I'm sure this game's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of goals. It's going to be action-packed. Sabres, Islanders. Man, could it be worse? Could it be worse that to be a fan of an NHL hockey team when you are like the worst for the hype going into a game then? You're on a 13-game losing streak. You're on a 13-year playoff drought, and you're going to play the most boring team in all of sports that does not care about winning big. They just want to beat you 1-0 and then lose in the playoffs. That's the New York Islanders' existence. Hey, maybe I envy it. I kind of don't, even though obviously you'd rather trade spots if you were a Sabre fan and an Islander fan, I think probably in the last couple of years. Anywho, that's the game tonight. We'll preview it. We'll talk a little bit about it coming up later on, especially the lineup. And Zach Benson maybe moving down the lineup a little bit for like the first time all year. And they're trying some different stuff with the top six. Dahlin back in. So there's a lot of interesting stuff to get to coming up a little bit later on in today's show. I do want to start, though, today with more of an around the league subject because, listen, when you're on a 13-game losing streak and open up the standings today, the Buffalo Sabres are in last place. Not in the Atlantic Division, although that's true, not just in the Eastern Conference. They are dead last in the entire National Hockey League. 32nd out of 32. They are behind Chicago, Nashville winning over the weekend, past Buffalo. So dead last in the NHL. And if you are interested, because you might lose track if you don't look at the standings anymore because of how bad they are 12 points out of a playoff spot right now. 12 points behind the Ottawa Senators, who have played the same amount of games. They're 12 points behind Tampa, who's played 3 fewer games. Like, the playoff race is just, they've obviously, this isn't saying much. They've killed it here. They've totally killed it. They had an opportunity. They were in a playoff spot for like a week before this losing streak began, and they just have torched. They've lit it up in flames and burned out their playoffs odds before the new year has even begun. So pretty bad. The other team that has been on a slide lately, although not nearly as bad as the Sabres, but they've lost 7 of 10. One of those few wins, of course, was against the Sabres. The New York Rangers continue to slide. They are 33 points in 33 games. They are 5 points out of a playoff spot. And that's a team with Stanley Cup aspirations, right? Like they have been one of the best teams in the league for a couple of years. And a lot of their advanced stuff has always looked good. Igor Shesterkin has been one of the best goalies in hockey. They have a pretty well put together veteran hockey club, I would say, but it's kind of all falling apart for them this year. And we did a show a couple of weeks ago talking about Chris Kreider as a big trade idea for the Sabres or any club, but the Sabres. And like, hey, if you want to look back on that show, you can find it on our feed. My overall takeaway was, listen, this guy kind of fits exactly what the Sabres need. They need a top 6 winger that can finish. And he was somebody that very much finishes around the net. He's very fast, so he can help you score on the rush. Contract stuff kind of worked out with him. Like, he's not super expensive. Not that, that where it matters for the cap. It would matter more for maybe for the Sabres. And whether the Pagulas want to put forward the money towards a player like that. This year, very odd year for Chris Kreider. 11 goals in 30 games. You may be saying, oh, that's not that bad. That's not that bad, but it is much lower than where he's been the last 3 years. I mean, he's on like a 25 to 30 goal pace right now, and that's off of 3 years where he went 39 goals, 36 goals, 52 goals. And not just that, he has only 1 assist on the year. So he might be scoring goals, and that's only been a little bit of regression, but the point total is going to come crashing down to earth. I mean, he's on pace for less than 40 points. So very, very odd year for Chris Kreider. The scoring chances are down. He's actually scoring at a higher percentage of them, but there's indications that maybe that will come back to earth already, and that's already including the regression that he's on. So all that being said, the reason I'm bringing him up today, a couple weeks after we talked about him, is he's a healthy scratch tonight. And we are into the roster freeze here. So the NHL roster freeze during the holiday break, when it happens, you're not allowed to make trades. You can make call-ups, emergency call-ups. Like, there's things you could do on that front. But you can't trade for Chris Kreider with this roster freeze. That's what normally happens. It'll actually, sorry, it's not in place yet, but maybe by the time you're listening, Christmas Eve through the 26th, I believe is never mind. It's the December 19th. I'm thinking of the practice freeze. You're not allowed to practice in that time period. 19th. So we are in the holiday freeze. So no Chris Kreider trade can happen right now. So maybe they could talk about trades. Maybe there is a deal in place, and whoever has made that deal has told the Rangers, or the Rangers have taken the initiative to say, okay, we're going to trade him, so let's hold him out until we're allowed to trade him, because the last thing we want him to do is get hurt and the deal fall apart. So there's speculation that maybe that is what's happening right now with Kreider. And if not, it's definitely a signal that they're willing to do business. If they're in a place with him where they don't even want him in the lineup. Could the Sabres surprise us? I really wonder if they could, because there have been, Pierre LeBrun wrote about the Sabres today. They're the subject of a lot of national media. LeBron only one that wrote about them. And he, within writing about the Sabres, and his commentary is more about kind of what we spent last week on, which is how come the Sabres don't hire experienced general managers? And he went beyond that. How come the Sabres don't have a experienced general manager in the front office to help Kevin Adams? They do not have that. He pointed out that he's heard from multiple league sources that Kevin Adams is very open-minded right now about trades. Now, when I read that, my first thought was, oh, he's willing to trade. He's willing to trade one of his core pieces. That Cousins was the first name that came to mind for me. But a Cousins for Kreider type of deal, something along those lines. Like, that might not look good on paper, but that when I see open-minded, I think that's what that kind of has to mean, is you're finally willing to trade people off your core. The thing about a Kreider trade now, though, like when we talked about this deal 2-3 weeks ago, it made more sense. The Sabres were in a playoff spot at that time, maybe even still. And if not, they were still pretty close to it. It still felt like they were live. So, hey, it's win now mode. Lindy said it in the offseason. Adam said it in the offseason. 33 years old, Chris Kreider, like, okay, I'll go do that. But now you're dead, right? You're not making it. I mean, unless you go on a furious run, which I just don't know how likely that is. You're going to pour at it's where they're in this flux here. You can't want both things. You want them to make a trade, and you can't also be mad if they do because you're already out of it. It would feel like it's too late, like it'd feel like, where were you a month ago with a deal like this? Where were you in the summer with a deal like this? And maybe in Kreider's case, there was no deal a month ago because the Rangers didn't want to play ball. Now they do. So it would be a weird timing trade if they were to acquire Chris Kreider today, because it does feel like they're kind of dead. But at the same time, I can't be mad if they go make a win now trade, because we've been begging for that for years. So we'll see if they're the team that ends up surprising us. I would probably bet against it, because it's probably safe to bet against the Sabres in whenever you're asking, hey, are they the team to go acquire big name veteran forward? Rule of thumb, bet against the Sabres. Don't get your hopes up on the Sabres making that trade, and you won't be let down. In this circumstance, I would say the same thing. And also, of course, as you have to do with every team, every player, Chris Kreider has a 15 no trade clause, and you'd have to assume that the Sabres are on that list, and that they would have to find a way to convince him to waive it if they ended up being the team that was willing to bid the most. And maybe they could. Maybe Kreider knows somebody on the team. Maybe somebody could help convince him. Maybe Adams would be able to convince him to come here. Whatever it would be. I shouldn't say it's not possible. It's just, again, something you wouldn't want to bet on. It is, again, weird timing right now for Chris Kreider. So someone to monitor in the league. When we come back, we'll get to some Sabres Islanders stuff, but I want to talk about tonight's starting goaltender. I want to talk about Luukkonen and the season that UPL is having. There have been a lot of other problem childs on this team. Luukkonen has quietly gone under the radar. I think is having a pretty poor season and a regression from last year. It might not be all his fault, but I don't think he's necessarily helping himself either. I want to get to UPL. I got some numbers on his year, how it's going. Trying my best to separate his performance from the rest of the team, which I know can always be tricky, but we'll take a shot at it when we come back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast is presented by PrizePicks. If you love sports, you're going to love PrizePicks. It is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into real money, whether it is hockey, tonight's game, football, there's another game tonight, or any of your favorite sports, basketball, baseball, which you'll, get rolling in a couple months. PrizePicks makes it easy to get in on the action. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on PrizePicks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Pickmas and offering 2 free picks in December. And when your picks hit, PrizePicks makes it easy to cash out. You get your money fast, and they now offer Venmo if that's the easiest way for you to do things. I know it's generally how I like to do things with PrizePicks and other apps. This week on PrizePicks, take a look at the hockey board. Take a look at Tage. More or less than 4 shots on goal. And of course, there's many, many other options. So simple to make picks and have fun with friends while potentially cashing out fast. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly. You don't have to win. Just play that $5 lineup, $50 instantly. PrizePicks, run your game. Sneaky Joe DiBiase back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Sabres and Islanders at 7:30. Luukkonen is going to be in goal tonight for the Sabres. James Reimer not looking stellar on Saturday against the Bruins, and not really against the Leafs either, but Luukkonen obviously got chased in that game on Friday night. Luukkonen has not had the best year. And to me, that's not that surprising. Like, we talked about him going into the year, and I was way off on Devin Levi. Like, I thought Levi was ready to take a step up, was ready to challenge Luukkonen for the starting job, and that has not happened. Not at least on his own merit. Devin Levi has not challenged Luukkonen at all for that. But Luukkonen has definitely dropped back number-wise, even if you separate him or include the performance of the team, it's dropped down. Luukkonen has my eye for tonight. He is who I am locked in on for tonight's game, seeing his type of performance. Because remember, last year they were better than this year so far. Like right now, they're not on pace to finish with as many points as they did last year, obviously. Last year, they had a lot of the same problems, right? Like they didn't score a ton of goals last year. They made a lot of mistakes. They were mentally fragile and able to crack and give up leads. Why were they so much better last year than this year? Well, and that's so much better. They weren't even that good last year. But Luukkonen was a big reason why. Luukkonen was fantastic last year. All his numbers were tremendous, and his regression in line with the team not progressing in any way has allowed them to bottom out to be the last place team in the NHL. So let's take a look at Luukkonen, how he's playing, what the road ahead is, and how much do we think his failures this year are tied to the team over his personal numbers. And there are different numbers that I'll get to that can join him with the team and others that separate his performance. And let's look at those. Let's start with the numbers that you're used to and the numbers that off the hockey reference numbers, right? His goals against average on the year is 3.12. Goals against average, very much tied to team success, right? That is a number that you can't really control a lot as a goaltender. It's not a great number to evaluate a goalie. It's more about the team itself. His save percentage, all right, a little bit closer to what is he doing versus the team. An .892 save percentage on the year. That's not, I mean, it's obviously below backup goalie level. Like that is a damn bad number for Luukkonen this season and a huge disappointment over where he's been. He was a .910 save percentage last year. Although the year before that, when the Sabres missed the playoffs by 1 point and they were scoring a bunch of goals, Luukkonen was at an .891 save percentage. So right now he is giving the Sabres the level of production he did 2 years ago. But the difference now is they are, quote unquote, playing a safer, more conservative style than they would have been playing fly around the ice hockey two years ago. So that's one part of it. And two, he is facing a pretty stout challenge in goal. His expected goals against on the year is 11th, and he's played fewer games than most of the guys in front of him. So he is seeing a stiff challenge. They are not doing great in terms of keeping quality scoring chances away from Luukkonen. He is facing a substantial challenge compared to a lot of other goalies. The number that I look at the most for goaltenders and the one that I would look at here with Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is his number in goals saved above expected. Goals saved above expected on the season, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is sitting 3.24 goals below expectation. And that is where I would want to focus on how is his season going. That number, the goal of that number, it's not perfect. No stat really is. But the goal of goals saved above expected is to tell you how good he's doing based on what a league average goalie would be. And to me, what that says is he, of course, is playing below what he should based on the chances that are going against him. And he's playing well below average. 3.2 goals below expectation is out of 81 goaltenders that qualify this season. It ranks 57th. Like it's below average. It's not like the worst goalie in the league, but it is certainly below average on the year. In fact, it's about the same number as former Sabre Jonas Johansson, who's the backup right now in Tampa Bay. It's not going well for Luukkonen. I think he looks pretty sloppy when it comes to rebounds. His technique, to me, has looked off this year. I do think he's doing about as well at bailing the Sabres out, making an incredible save when he shouldn't, but I think you're seeing a higher rate of the easy ones go in, or I'm just finding myself more often going when Luukkonen lets a goal, and I think I wanted a save on that one. Again, he makes some incredible saves to make up for it a little bit, but there are goals that go in where I'm going, I want to save there from Luukkonen, and you're not getting it. And listen, this was always possible, if not even, I wouldn't say this bad, it was likely, but certainly possible. Luukkonen I still think is a good goaltender and has a good future ahead. He's going to have years like this, though. This is most goalies in the NHL. Up and down, up and down. Good year, bad year. Great year, terrible year. Average year, average year. Like you're going to see ups and downs from almost every goalie in the league except for the true greats. And I've just always been slow to believe that Luukkonen is going to be one of the true greats of the league. I was slow even to think he was a starting caliber goalie in the NHL. I think he's to that, but this is also a reason why you need two quality goalies in the NHL. It's not just injury, it's goalies are up and down. You never know who's going to have the up year and who's going to have the down year. And if your number one is having the down year, well, it'd be nice to have a 1B that is able to kind of carry the load, play a few more games than you were planning on before a season. The problem, I think, here is that Devin Levi, who you would have hoped, and I would have hoped would have been their 1B in this situation, has been just as bad, if not even worse, because goals saved have expected on the year for Levi, playing only 8 games compared to Luukkonen's 23, he's averaged 4.5 goals below expectation. That's one of the worst numbers in the NHL. So Levi not progressing, I think has in combination with Luukkonen's regression, has made it really tough for the Sabres in goal. I think in goal, it's really letting them down. And that's a position where you might have hoped, hey, if the team itself doesn't progress, that the goalie group can carry me, can win games for me when I'm having an off night. And that's not happening this year. If the Sabres are having an off night, their goaltenders are not bailing them out almost ever. And when you give a goalie a 5-year contract, when you make promises to a rookie goalie in Devin Levi, who had the best college career ever, and I know he's young, but just you were more hopeful. You were hopeful that a stud prospect like Levi and a guy you paid and committed to in Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen were going to be able to be the level of goalies that if you had an off night, you could win anyway. And they have not been that at all. They have been supreme letdowns on the year, and Luukkonen doesn't escape that for me. He's not the number one headline as to why they're losing at all. He's not getting a lot of help in front of him, but he is not, to me, not deserving of any criticism. There's a little bit on his plate, too, for the failures of this season. All right, when we come back, let's look at the lineup tonight for Sabres Islanders. I'll have my sneaky parlay of the day. And when we talk of lineup, Zach Benson, I want to mention, and we'll take a look at what we're looking at for Sabres and Islanders ahead here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast is presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. When we look at my sneaky parlay of the day, we'll take a look at FanDuel. The Sabres on the night are underdogs. No surprise there. But, hey, maybe if you got a gut feeling that this is the night that they finally win a game, head over. You get some plus odds. Or if you want that emotional hedge, that's where I'm going. Emotional hedges. Gotta love them. Gotta love an emotional hedge. Check it out all on FanDuel Sportsbook. And, of course, with hockey going on, you got the Sabre bets, but the NFL playoffs are almost here. And it's not too late to get on the regular season action. You got a Monday night game tonight. You got games on Christmas. So a lot to look at with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W, so check it out. Visit FanDuel.com today. That's FanDuel.com. Your chance to at $250 in bonus bets, again, if you win your first $5 bet. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Final segment here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Sabres and Islanders, which never seems to go well, but hey, maybe this will be the night they do it. 30 days since a win. Tonight's lineup, let's take a look at it. The Sabres are going to keep Jason Zucker on that top line as they have for a couple of nights now with Tage Thompson and Alex Tuch. Jack Quinn goes back in the lineup after being a healthy scratch on Saturday against the Bruins. He'll be back with Cousins and Peterka. The letdown line, as I might want to start calling it, because those are the three guys that have let them down the most this year. I think we start calling it the letdown line. Kulich, Benson, Krebs on line 3. That's what I want to talk a little bit about ahead of tonight's game, is that line, and more in particular, Zach Benson. I want to get more in depth on Zach Benson on one of our shows this week. But to quickly mention like what I want to get into and a thought on him for tonight. Benson, again, is a player that I am so impressed with how smart of a player he is. I think he's the smartest player on the team. I think he has the best feel on the team. His hockey IQ, the way he sees the game, I think is the best on the whole team. Him and Dahlin. But the lack of size and athleticism at this age is a problem. And it's a problem mostly for the role he's been asked to play. And that is maybe one of the biggest criticisms of the Sabres from last summer and in the last 2 years is, last year, I was talking about this with a buddy after the Toronto game who was ranting about how Zach Benson he was great in the preseason last year, but how he was capable of making the team at 18 years old when physically he was not ready. And part of it was how good he looked, right? And how smart of a player he is. Part of it was the roster. Further that, this year, what's maybe more incredible and maybe more deserving of criticism is they have had him in a top 6 role. They've been asking him to be a top 6 forward when he's still clearly, skating-wise and size-wise, is not ready for the NHL. His mind is the only thing that has him here. They have been asking him to be a top 6 contributor, a top 6 producer on this team. Tonight, there might be one night that I'm forgetting. Tonight is the first night I can remember since the start of the year that he is not in the top 6. They put him down on line 3 with Kulich and Krebs. And I might argue, even as the biggest Benson defender, that's where he should have been since the beginning of the year. If you were going to have him on the team and not send him to Rochester, let him dominate down there, juniors, send him back to juniors and dominate, have him in the bottom 6. He's a very good defensive player. He's a very good two-way player. He's very responsible. He knows his angles. He knows where to be. He doesn't get misplaced too often. Put him in the bottom 6. Let him grow down there, and he'll take his lumps. It'll be a little tougher for him to play that physical brand of hockey, but he's going to give you some responsible defending. They haven't done it all year. He's been asked to contribute offensively, and what's resulted in is 4 goals and 6 assists in 28 games, 10 points in 28 games. You should not. You need to do better than that for a top 6 winger. And this is game 30. What is it now? 33? 35. Sorry. Game 35. And this is the first time they're getting to this. That is a problem, in my opinion. I'm glad to see Benson go down a spot. I don't need him to send to juniors. I love watching him play. I'm impressed by him. I want to see him develop in the NHL. But, there is also Kulich on that same line. You have 2 guys that on most teams would not be in the NHL right now because they don't look physically up to it. And this is a hockey team where they don't have the ability to replace them with veterans because their GM lacks the ability and they can't get guys to come here. So you guys got to play. Hey, Zach, hey, Yuri, I know you guys aren't really ready fully for the NHL, but we don't have a choice. You got to play. And that's where I feel like they're at right now. Kulich probably should not be in the NHL right now. He probably should still be down in Rochester. Benson should probably still be in juniors or somewhere else. But they have to play. They have to play right now because there's no other option. And that's part of the fault of this organization in the last 2 years. That they said it was time to win. They brought in a win now coach, and they have not married that with the roster. Their roster still looks like a rebuilding roster. Their roster still looks like a developmental roster. And You shouldn't be surprised. You shouldn't be surprised that you can't win big when not only like it's one thing for Zach Benson to make the team, but again, it's another thing for him to be in the top 6. That's where I'm at as the biggest Benson defender. Islanders Sabres for tonight. All right, let's give you a parlay for tonight's game. I'm going to go Islanders money line, -156. They are favored in this game. The over-under at 5.5. I'm going to take the under in this game. I'm going to bet for all misery. How about that? I got to give you something, Sabres, though, right? So let's go anytime goal bet. I'm going to go with Jason Zucker, +350, far down the list a little bit, playing with Tage Thompson and Alex Tuch on the top unit. I'm going to go Islanders money line, under 5.5 goals, Zucker anytime score for like a 3. I've got like a 3-1 Islanders win over the Sabres in this one with not a lot of chances, not a lot of scoring opportunities. Maybe one of the 3 is an empty netter, but Zucker on the top line, I'm going to go with him as the guy to score. So those 3 together, +29.22. So that's a big one. 10 to win 292, or 100 to win 2,922. That's what I'm going with for tonight's sneaky good parlay of tonight's game. Zucker to score under 5.5 goals and Islanders money line. We'll see if it gets to a month. It's been 1 month, actually. Excuse me. It's exactly 1 month since the last Sabres win. They lose tonight. It'll be more than a month. The all-time record, I believe I saw for the longest winless streak in NHL history is 18. The Sabres tied a couple of years ago. And we're going to have to start talking about that being a real possibility if they don't win this game tonight. So enjoy the game as best you can, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres if you want to rant during the game tonight. Throw us a text, and we'll be bantering back and forth. Talk to you tomorrow here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Check out Locked On Bills with Joe Marino, recapping Bills Patriots. Steal and Flip got you covered for Locked On Fantasy Hockey, looking ahead to the week to come in the NHL. Talk to you tomorrow here on Locked On Sabres.